I knew something was off the second I saw the HOA president, Krista Langley, standing on my driveway again, clipboard in hand like it was a weapon. She had that look. The one every guy in the neighborhood knew too well. Tight-lipped, eyes squinting like she was auditing your soul. I was halfway through changing the oil on my truck when she cleared her throat. "Patrick," she said, drawing out my name like it left a bad taste in her mouth. "We need to talk about the noise." Again. I wiped my hands on a rag. "It's a Saturday afternoon, Krista. I'm not throwing raves. I'm fixing my truck." She held up a sheet of paper. "I've had 3 complaints about loud banging and barking at night. Your garage is a constant source of disruption." That last part made me pause. "Barking?" I leaned against the hood of my truck. "You mean the dog I adopted from the shelter? His name's Diesel. He sleeps inside. Doesn't bark unless someone's messing around where they shouldn't be." Her nose wrinkled like I'd just said a swear word. "There are rules, Patrick. Noise ordinances. Garage usage guidelines. It's all in the handbook you signed." "Oh, you mean the handbook you people update every 2 weeks without telling anyone?" Krista's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. "You're already on thin ice after refusing to paint your porch that approved shade of desert beige. Keep pushing, and we'll impose daily fines." If she expected me to grovel, she'd have to wait a long time. "Go ahead," I said. "But I'm not repainting my porch or getting rid of my dog. And if you want to inspect my garage, you'll need a warrant." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." I didn't think much of it. HOA threats were like mosquito bites around here. Annoying but harmless. At least, I thought they were harmless. That night, around 2 in the morning, Diesel started growling. Not the playful kind. The deep, low rumble that said something was deeply wrong. I grabbed a flashlight and crept downstairs. The garage door was closed, but the side door, the one facing the backyard, was cracked open. I froze. No one had access to that door but me, and I always locked it. I pushed the door open slowly, flashlight sweeping across the concrete floor. Diesel stood near the back, hackles raised, teeth bared. And then I saw her, Krista Langley, in my garage, holding her phone up like she was recording something. She turned, startled, just as Diesel lunged. She shrieked and stumbled backward, slamming into a shelf of paint cans that crashed loudly to the floor. Diesel didn't bite, he just cornered her, barking like a demon, keeping her frozen in place. I moved quickly, yanked him back by the collar. "What the hell are you doing in my garage?" I barked. Her hands were shaking. I was investigating a noise complaint. As HOA president, it's within my rights to— "No." I cut her off. "You broke into my property. That's trespassing." "I didn't break anything. The door was unlocked." "No, it wasn't. I know for a fact it was locked. You picked it or used some tool to open it." Her face twisted. "You'll be hearing from the board." "No, Krista. You'll be hearing from the police." I locked Diesel back in the house and called the cops. She stood there the whole time, trying to straighten her blouse and mutter about bylaws and neighborhood unity, but she knew she was caught. When the officers arrived, I handed them the security footage clear as day, her gloved hand fiddling with the lock, slipping inside, phone light on. Krista tried to play the concerned citizen card, but the cops weren't buying it. "Ma'am, that's breaking and entering," one of them said. "You're under arrest." The officers didn't handcuff Krista until after they walked her outside. Probably didn't want to scare the neighbors too much. But the moment those cuffs clicked around her wrists, I saw porch lights flicker on up and down the block. Curtains twitching. Phones lifted behind windows. The whole street was waking up to a new kind of HOA meeting, one where the president left in the back of a cruiser. I didn't say a word while they read her rights. She didn't either. As the squad car pulled away, one of the officers stayed behind to finish the report. Officer Ramirez. Young guy, but sharp. He kept glancing at the garage door like it was holding secrets. You mentioned you locked that side door before bed, he said, flipping through his notepad. You remember what kind of lock it was? Deadbolt. Steel core. Installed it myself 2 months ago, after someone tried cutting through the fence. He jotted that down. No signs of forced entry. Either she had tools or a key. That possibility hadn't crossed my mind yet. But when he said it, it clicked. I stepped back from the garage entrance, staring at the lock like it owed me an explanation. You think someone gave her a copy? She didn't look like she was guessing out there. Walked straight in. The rest of the night blurred into paperwork and statements. By dawn, the house was quiet again except for Diesel, who refused to leave my side. I took the day off work. Not because I was shaken. Because I knew Krista. She didn't do anything without a bigger plan behind it. The next morning, I found out what it was. A letter was taped to my front door. No envelope. Just a single page, printed in bold font like a ransom note. Letterhead. No signature. Pending investigation into neighborhood safety and compliance violations, your property will be subject to a board review to determine eligibility for continued residency. I read it 3 times, then laughed. Out loud. So this was the strategy. Break the law, get caught, and then retaliate by trying to evict me on paper. I walked straight to my office, pulled out the small safe under the desk, and unlocked the folder I hadn't touched in over a year. Inside were the original HOA bylaws from when I bought the house. The real ones. Not the Frankenstein mess Krista and her crew had been stapling together every few months. I also had something better minutes from a meeting that happened before I moved in. The one where the HOA board voted to remove language that allowed them to revoke residency without a court order. And guess who signed that vote into effect? Krista Langley. Her own signature. In blue ink. By lunchtime, I had a plan. I started with the county clerk's office. Asked for all the public filings the HOA had submitted in the last 2 years. Took a while, but they printed out a stack thicker than a phone book. Then I drove downtown and met with an attorney I'd known since college, Marcus Flynn. Real estate law was his specialty. He owed me a favor from years ago when I helped him renovate a rental property through a winter so cold his pipes burst twice. Marcus took one look at the files, flipped through the bylaws, and let out a low whistle. They're operating outside their scope, he said. This isn't just some overzealous president. This is coordinated. How bad? He pointed to a page. Here. They filed amendments to the charter without community votes. That's fraud. And this one using HOA funds to pay for private security cameras? That's misappropriation. I leaned back in the chair. And the break-in? Oh, he said, lifting his eyebrows. That's the cherry on top. That's criminal trespass and unlawful surveillance. If she accessed your garage and recorded anything and tried to use it as grounds for enforcement, that's a double violation, civil and criminal. We filed an injunction that same afternoon. Marcus drafted it in record time, petitioning the court to freeze all HMA disciplinary actions against me until a full audit of their conduct could be completed. Within 48 hours, the judge approved it. The letter on my door was now legally meaningless. But the real fireworks started at the emergency HOA meeting scheduled for that Sunday. Word had spread fast. Not just about Krista's arrest, but about the injunction, about the audit, about the fact I'd filed a formal complaint with the state HOA oversight board. The clubhouse was packed. People who hadn't shown up in years came just to see what would happen. I brought Marcus with me. He didn't say a word, just stood in the back, arms crossed, legal pad in hand. Krista wasn't there, still in custody awaiting arraignment, but her vice president, a guy named Brent Halverson, tried to run the show. He stood at the front of the room, looking like someone had dropped him into a bonfire. Sweat staining his collar, voice cracking every few sentences. We were here to address recent misunderstandings, he stammered. We want to assure everyone that the board is committed to transparency and neighborhood safety. I raised my hand. He hesitated,
Ah,
Yes. I stood up. Can you explain why a member of your board illegally entered my garage and attempted to fabricate a noise complaint using unauthorized surveillance? Gasps rippled through the room. Brent paled. I can't speak to that, he said. That's a separate legal matter. Then maybe you can explain why the board submitted amendments without community votes, or used HOA funds to install equipment on private property lines. Someone shouted from the back. Wait, what? Marcus stepped forward, holding up a copy of the filings. We have documentation showing at least 7 unauthorized amendments in the past 2 years. These are now part of a formal audit by the State Division of Homeowners Associations. Brent tried to regain control. Let's not jump to conclusions, another resident, Mrs. Avery, raised her voice. My dues went up last year with no explanation. You said it was for beautification projects. Was that part of the unauthorized spending too? Brent looked like he wanted to vanish. I let them argue.
it was better that way.
Let the neighborhood get loud about what they were waking up to. By the end of the meeting, a motion had been made by a retired firefighter named Jean to suspend all board activity until an interim committee could be elected. The vote was nearly unanimous. By dusk, Brent had stepped down. 2 more board members followed him out the door. Krista was still in jail, awaiting charges. And me? I spent the evening in my backyard, grilling steaks for the neighbors who'd stuck around. Diesel lay under the picnic table, tail thumping every time someone offered him a bite. Nobody mentioned paint colors. Nobody talked about lawn heights or mailbox placement. Instead, they asked questions. About bylaws. About voting rights. About how to make sure this never happened again. And for the first time since I moved in, the neighborhood actually felt like a community. Not one ruled by clipboards and fines, but by people. 3 days after the emergency HOA meeting, I got a call from Detective Laura Chun with the county sheriff's department. Her voice was calm but clipped, the kind of tone that told me she'd been sifting through something ugly and didn't have time for pleasantries. Mr. Callahan, she said, are you free this afternoon? I'd like to go over some developments related to the break-in. I agreed, without hesitation. She met me at my house just after noon, wearing plain clothes and carrying a thin case file under one arm. Diesel watched her closely from the porch as she approached. She gave him a nod, but didn't try to pet him. Inside, she pulled out a small stack of printed photos and laid them across my kitchen table. I leaned over them. They were stills from another security system, one I didn't recognize. These were taken from a motion-activated camera installed on your neighbor's property, pointed directly at your back fence, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Whose? Karen Woodley. She lives 2 houses down from you, east side. Retired, teaches piano lessons out of her home. I know her. She once filed a complaint because Diesel growled at her garden gnomes. Detective Chun didn't smile. Her footage shows Krista entering her yard through the back gate the night of the incident. But more importantly, it shows someone else handing her a key. She slid the next photo toward me. It was grainy but unmistakable. Brent Halverson, the former vice president, holding a small silver key between 2 fingers and passing it to Krista like he was handing off a stick of gum. That's how she got in, I said. He had a copy. Chun nodded. We traced the key to a locksmith the HOA contracted last summer, supposedly for rekeying the clubhouse. But the invoice shows multiple copies made. No documentation of where they went.
No signatures.
That's highly irregular. I sat back, arms crossed. So they were making keys to residents' properties? We don't know how many, but it's enough to warrant a broader investigation. The locksmith's cooperating now that we've involved the district attorney's office. If we can prove unauthorized duplication for the purpose of illegal entry, that bumps the charges. I stared at the photos, my stomach tightening. That's not just trespassing anymore. No, it's not, she said. We're looking at conspiracy to commit unlawful entry, possible burglary enhancement, and abuse of a governing position for unlawful surveillance. And that's just Krista and Brent. I looked up sharply. There are more? Chun hesitated, then tapped the folder. We pulled financials from the HOA's accounts after your attorney submitted the audit request. Turns out there's a second account unlisted and fed through a shell LLC registered to a P.O. box in Chandler. That account's been used to pay for things like private IT services, unlicensed security contractors, and this is the kicker, a monthly retainer to a consultant named Lydia Greaves. Former HOA president. Ring any bells? I nearly laughed. She moved to Florida 2 years ago. Said she was done with the stress.
Guess not.
She was still pulling strings and taking $500 a month in hush money to keep quiet about the locksmith scheme. We've got emails, bank records, and a signed agreement between her and Krista. She's already agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. I stood, pacing slowly across the kitchen. How deep does this go? Chun folded her arms. The entire board, past and present, is under review. At least 6 of them knew about the key copies. 3 more used HOA funds to pay for personal home improvements under the guise of community beautification. One of them installed a pool heater and charged it as a clubhouse expense. Another filed a fake invoice for landscaping that never happened. I leaned against the counter, letting it all sink in, and they tried to evict me for fixing my truck. Chun flipped her folder shut. We'll be making additional arrests this week. You'll be contacted as a witness. If you're comfortable with it, the DA wants you to testify when this goes to court. I didn't hesitate. I'm in. That evening, word spread faster than gossip at a bake sale. Brent was picked up at his office, city code enforcement, ironically, and 2 other board members were brought in later that night. Karen Woodley's camera footage had become Exhibit A in an expanding web of criminal charges. Residents started showing up at my door. Some brought questions. Others brought pie. A few just wanted to apologize for ignoring the red flags for so long. One guy, Paul Weston, a former Marine who worked nights as a paramedic, stood on my porch with his arms folded tight and a tired look in his eyes. I always thought you were exaggerating, he said. About the rules, the fines, the harassment. I figured if I kept my head down, they'd leave me alone. I nodded. That's what they count on. Paul looked past me toward the garage. They ever get in there before?
No.
But I think they were trying to. Diesel kept reacting to something at night. I thought it was raccoons at first. He scratched his jaw. I've got a couple of trail cams from my hunting trips. Night vision, motion activated, no Wi-Fi. They're hard to detect. Want me to set a few up around your place? I clapped him on the shoulder. You just became the new neighborhood watch. By the end of the week, the interim committee had formed. Unlike the old board, they held their meetings in the open on front lawns, with folding chairs and clipboards, no closed doors or mysterious votes. They also voted to install a community bulletin board near the mailboxes, not digital, not password protected. Just a cork wall with thumbtacks and paper notices. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. The state HOA oversight board sent in a compliance officer who began combing through years of documents. Every homeowner received a full copy of the original bylaws, along with a printed list of every illegal amendment that had been quietly added over the years. One of them tried to ban wind chimes. The compliance officer, a woman named Tara with a no-nonsense haircut and a voice like gravel, called it the most blatant abuse of HOA authority I've seen in 20 years. At Krista's preliminary hearing, I sat in the second row behind the prosecution. She walked in wearing a navy blue blazer that didn't quite hide the tension in her shoulders.
She didn't look at me.
She didn't look at anyone. The judge read the charges, 11 in total, and denied her request for house arrest. The courtroom murmured as the DA laid out the timeline, each point backed with evidence: the locksmith contract, the key transfer, the internal emails, the surveillance attempts, and the financial misappropriations. When it was my turn to testify, I kept it simple. I told the truth. I described the night Diesel barked me awake, the door ajar, the flashlight beam, and Krista's face when she realized she'd been caught. I ended with a single sentence. They didn't want peace and quiet. They wanted control. The judge nodded once, then called a recess. Outside the courtroom, Marcus handed me a copy of the civil suit he'd just filed on behalf of 12 homeowners, including me. If successful, it would recoup every dollar taken by the fraudulent board and distribute the damages directly to the residents. As we left the courthouse, a local news crew asked if I wanted to make a statement. I shook my head. Instead, I walked home. Diesel trotted beside me, tongue out, tail high. The sun was setting over the neighborhood rooftops, casting everything in gold. For the first time in a long while, the air felt easy. Not because the fight was over, but because now, finally, everyone knew who the enemy really was. The morning after Krista's arraignment, I woke to find a plain, white envelope shoved through my mail slot, no postage, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper. Drop the civil suit. You've made your point. No need to drag the neighborhood down with you. No name. No signature. But the message was clear. I called Marcus and read the note to him over breakfast. He didn't sound surprised. They're testing your nerves. Hoping you'll flinch. Don't. He was right. I'd already seen what happened when people stayed quiet. By noon, the new interim committee had arranged a town hall in the park. Folding chairs, a portable mic, and a backdrop of kids playing soccer. Simple but honest. No banners, no didactics. I sat near the front next to Gene, the retired firefighter who'd been elected acting chair. He held a clipboard like it was an axe and kept glancing at the crowd, eyes scanning for trouble. Anything weird happen this morning? I asked. He nodded once. Someone tried to pry open the lockbox where we're collecting resident votes for the permanent board. Didn't get in, but left scratch marks. We've got someone watching it now. Across the field, Paul Weston was standing watch with 2 other neighbors, all former service members. They weren't armed, just present. That was enough. Gene took the mic and cleared his throat. Before we get to candidates, there's a matter of safety we need to address. He turned to me. Patrick, you want to explain what was found in the financials? I stepped up, holding a folder of my own. During the audit, we discovered a series of reimbursements listed under community wellness initiatives. Problem is, there's no record of any initiatives. No events, no projects, no receipts. A woman in the 3rd row spoke up. So, where did the money go? I held up a printed transaction list. A private account in Oregon, registered to a company called Greystone Civic Solutions. Supposedly a consulting firm for HOAs. But it doesn't exist outside of a website with a stock photo homepage. We traced the payments over $40,000 across 16 months. A hush settled. Even the kids on the field had stopped yelling. Gene took the mic back. We've turned that information over to the county's financial crimes unit. They've opened a formal investigation. We've also notified the insurance provider that bonded the former board members. A tall man in the back raised his hand. What happens if they're found guilty? Gene didn't flinch. Restitution. Criminal charges. And if the bonding company pays out, that money goes back into our community fund. A woman near the front asked what everyone was thinking. How did it go on this long? I answered before Gene could. Because they relied on silence. On people being too busy or too tired to ask questions. They twisted rules behind closed doors and dared anyone to push back. No one asked anything after that. They didn't need to. The vote went forward without delay. By evening, the new board was officially elected 5 residents without connections to the old regime. A mix of veterans, small business owners, and a retired judge who used to mediate housing disputes for the city. People with nothing to gain but peace and order. The next morning, I finally cleaned the mess in my garage. Diesel lay near the open door, eyes half closed, tail flicking lazily whenever the breeze shifted. I didn't need him on guard anymore, but he still kept watch like it was his job. While sorting through the shelving unit Krista had crashed into, I found something wedged behind a paint can, a small, black USB stick. No label.
No dust.
It hadn't been there before the break-in. I plugged it into a laptop I kept offline. The folder inside was titled HOA Audio. Dozens of short files. I clicked on the first one. Krista's voice crackled through the speakers. If we can get Callahan cited 3 times, we can trigger the nuisance provision. Doesn't matter if it holds up. We just need the paper trail. The next file, Brent. What if he fights it? Krista. Then we escalate. Late-night inspections, anonymous complaints. Everyone's got a breaking point. I listened to every file. Each one made my hands tighten on the desk. Conversations about fabricating violations, targeting specific homeowners, even discussions about forging compliance signatures. I called Detective Chin immediately. She arrived within 30 minutes, this time with a tech specialist who imaged the USB and cataloged the files. By nightfall, they had enough to reopen the case against Brent with new charges: conspiracy, falsifying documents, and attempted coercion. Krista, still in pretrial custody, was hit with 5 additional charges the next morning. Her bail was revoked. I didn't go to the next hearing, but I didn't need to. The DA's office released a statement confirming that multiple former board members were now cooperating to avoid prison time. They were turning over everything: emails, payment records, even the names of residents they pressured into silence. One of them, a quiet man named Harold who used to be in charge of compliance review, came to my house with tears in his eyes. I didn't know how far it had gone, he said. They promised me a break on my dues if I helped with the paperwork. I never thought they'd actually break into someone's home. I offered him a chair on the porch. Diesel sat between us, tail wagging gently. Harold handed me a manila envelope. These are the original inspection reports. Unedited. The ones they made me rewrite. I gave the envelope to Marcus the next day. He passed it on to the DA's office, who confirmed the documents matched the falsified versions we'd already uncovered. That sealed the case. By the end of the month, all 6 former board members had either been arrested, charged, or fled the state. Lydia Greaves, the ex-president in Florida, had her immunity deal revoked after they found she'd been laundering HOA funds through a fake maintenance company. She was extradited within the week. With the lawsuits in full swing and the criminal cases stacking up, the community started to rebuild. The new board held an open call landscaping day. Residents showed up with gloves, shovels, and snacks. We trimmed hedges, planted native flowers, even repainted the mail kiosk. No one argued. No one cited regulations. A high school senior painted a mural on the clubhouse wall, a sprawling tree with dozens of open hands as leaves, each one painted by a different neighbor. No one asked for approval. During one of the evening gatherings on the green, Jean handed me a small wooden plaque. It wasn't fancy, just a carved piece of cedar with my name and the words for standing up. I didn't make a speech. I just nodded, shook his hand, and passed the plaque to Diesel so he could sniff it like it was a trophy. Later, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the kids played tag under the string lights, I sat back in my chair and let the noise roll over me. Laughter.
Barking.
Music from a cheap Bluetooth speaker. Not one complaint. Not one clipboard in sight.